Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 67 of Chef's Apprentice, Learning to Cook Like a Pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is seared sea scallop with roasted red pepper and white bean puree. This is a tasty and visually appealing dish that pairs unlikely companions, sea scallops and pureed white beans, but they go together surprisingly well. The roasted red pepper provides a visual stimulation in what would otherwise be a monochromatic dish. The roasted red pepper and caviar garnish also balance the tastes and textures of the beans and the scallops. Here you will use a slightly different method to prepare the beans. Stock is added near the end of the cooking rather than at the beginning. Some people think that starting with stock infuses more flavor. Other people think that adding the stock at the end yields more flavorful beans. You decide. Techniques today are preparing dried beans, roasting red peppers, seasoning, cooking beans, pureeing, adjusting seasoning and keeping warm, searing, plating, and garnishing. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 67. Of course, we're going to need jumbo scallops. They're the star of this show. Now, the description calls for 6 to do 6 small plates. I'm only doing 4 tonight, but I've given you all of the other ingredients in the right amounts that is in the description. These are jumbo sea scallops. I got these from the Pure Food Fish Market at the Pike's Place Fish Market in Seattle by mail order. They came perfectly frozen and they're beautiful. They're just jumbo and they're beautiful. Now, I'm going to put these back in the fridge for now. Now, in addition to that, we will need to have 1 cup of white beans that have been soaking in cold water overnight. Okay? We'll also need to have 2 red bell peppers that we're going to roast. We'll need to have about 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. It doesn't have to be real expensive balsamic vinegar. We'll need to have about 1 cup of chicken stock. Remember, we make our own stock in this course, and there's a bonus lesson on how to make stock. It's also on my website, www.chefsapprentice.com. So we're going to need about 1 cup of chicken stock. I might have a little more. I think this is about 2 cups. I'm just going to use what we're going to need. We'll also need to have some kosher salt and some ground white pepper, also a pepper mill for some freshly ground black pepper. We'll also need to have some caviar, 1 ounce of caviar as a garnish. Now, it doesn't have to be real expensive caviar. Most of the caviar that you see is black in color. This is a golden color. This is actually whitefish roe. Okay, so we're going to try that. I haven't used this kind before. It's really a garnish. It adds some extra flavor to the dish. You're not going to need a lot of it. We'll also need a high smoke point oil. I'm using avo oil today. And then we'll need some sea salt. Now, we could use this sea salt, Mediterranean sea salt grinder that I got at Costco. It's a Kirkland brand. This is great, actually, because you just take the bottom off, and then you turn it, and it burns. So I had a little technical difficulty there. I was just showing you that this is a built-in salt grinder in this Kirkland brand Mediterranean sea salt. Plenty of other brands of sea salt out there. There's Fleur de Sel. It comes in a little container like this. So that's all the ingredients that we need. We'll come back. I'll show you the equipment for lesson 67. Okay, for equipment for lesson 67, we'll need a cutting board, chef's knife. We're going to need tongs to roast the redded peppers on the open flame on the stove, assuming you're using an open flame. I'll talk more about how you can do it without the open flame a little bit later on. We'll also need a bowl in which to soak the white beans. They've been soaking overnight in this bowl. We need to have a brown paper bag. We're going to put the red peppers into this bag after they've been roasted to sweat off their skins. The best thing to use for this is a paper lunch bag, brown paper lunch bag. We need to have a saucepan in which to cook the beans and a wooden spoon. We need to have a food processor to puree the beans. You could probably also use a blender. It depends on how many beans you have. You have to have enough to be able to catch on the blades of the blender. We also need to have a strainer and rubber spatula and a wooden spoon. As I've said before, sometimes it's hard to know which is going to press the puree through the strainer better, a wooden spoon or a spatula, so we'll have both handy. We also need to have a cast iron skillet, which is on the stove. You need to have a plating spoon at the end, a soup spoon size, and then you need to have a caviar spoon. Now, the experts say that you should have a spoon that's made out of bone or horn in which to scoop out your caviar. They say that metal spoons will change the flavor of the caviar. You really don't need to have a bone or a horn spoon. A lot of caviar now comes blister packed with a little spoon, but if you don't have the proper spoon, use a plastic spoon. Okay, that's all of the equipment we'll need. We'll break, come back, and start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to cook the beans. Okay, so first we're going to put the stove on medium heat, and I've covered the beans in the saucepan with about half, 3/4 of an inch of water. You could add a little more, because as the beans cook, that water could cook off, and you need to keep an eye on them to make sure that they don't get dried out. In other words, you want them to be covered with water while they're cooking. And it's going to take 1 to 2 hours. Cook them until they're tender. We're not adding salt and pepper at this point, because some people say that if you salt beans before you cook them, then they will get tougher. So we will salt the beans, season the beans at the end after they've been cooked. All right, so we're going to let this come to a boil, and then we're going to reduce the heat to a simmer, and then we're going to cook them for 1 to 2 hours, testing them every now and then until they're tender. Okay, the next thing on our prep list is to roast the peppers on the open flame. So what we're going to do is take these peppers with the tongs, put them right down on the open burner. Now, be careful around the open flame. If you do not have a stove with a flame, you have an electric stove, what you can do instead is cut the peppers in half this way, toss them in some olive oil, shake out the seeds that are inside, and put them cut side down on an oiled sheet pan or sizzle plate. Put them in the oven at 350 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour. Keep a good eye on them. Check them probably after about 40 minutes. You want the skin to start look to be shriveled up and wrinkled and starting to turn dark, okay? But what we're going to do, since we do have an open flame, is we're going to just roast the pepper right there on the flame. We're going to leave it on the flame until it starts to blister, and then we're just going to keep turning it and turning it until the whole pepper is basically blackened. Now, as you can see, the skin is starting to get blackened on the bottom. But we're going to keep turning these until we basically have it blackened all over. Now, as you can see, this pepper is getting pretty blackened, okay? But there's still pretty good amount of red, so we're going to keep trying to get it as blackened as possible. This one's not going as fast. Okay, so they're looking pretty good. I've gotten blackened even up here on top around the stem, and you're always going to have a little red in the creases. This one's pretty much perfect. This one, there's still a little bit of red area here, and the top is looking pretty good. I'm going to say that these are about ready to go into the paper bag. Okay, we're going to turn off the flame, and then we're going to put the peppers into the paper bag, and then close up that bag, and we're going to just set this aside and let the peppers steam in there for about 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, I let the peppers steam for about a half an hour. Now what we're going to do is we're going to peel off the burned outer skin, and it'll just flake off basically. I'm going to get most of it off, and then I'm going to rinse it under the water, okay? Okay, now I've gotten most of it off. I'm now going to open the pepper, take out the stem, and try to shake out most of the seeds. Rinse it out a little bit. Okay, good. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other pepper. Okay, the next thing on our prep list is to cut the red peppers into squares. Okay, now we're serving, or at least the description calls for enough for 6 people. So from these 2 peppers, what you'd want to do is cut out 6 squares that are roughly an inch and a quarter to an inch and a half square. Okay, now So there we go. There's one. Oops. There we go. There's one. Okay, perfect. About 1.5 inches, 1 1/4, 1.5 inches square. And we want to get about 6 of those out of these 2 peppers. Okay, there we go. Now, what do we do with the extra pepper? Well, you can make a roasted red pepper sauce out of it. You could use it to make roasted red pepper soup. You could slice them up and use them as a garnish. You could put them in a salad. Now we have our 6 pieces, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, our beans have been boiling for about 2 hours on medium heat. I've had to replenish the water a couple of times, and they are now tender. Now we're going to add about a cup of chicken stock, and then we're going to bring that back to a boil, and then boil those beans until the liquid has reduced so it's down just above the beans. Okay, so the beans are just below the surface of the liquid. That's about what we want, because when we puree these beans, we don't want the puree to be too thick. We want it to be about the consistency of applesauce. Okay, now it's time to puree the beans. We're going to add the balsamic vinegar. It's about 2 tablespoons, but I just eyeballed it. It's just adding a little bit of depth of flavor, okay? So it doesn't have to be exact. Then we want to add some salt. Remember, we did not salt the beans earlier. Do it lightly. We can adjust the seasoning a little bit later. And then some white pepper. Remember, this goes a long way. Why are we using white pepper? So we don't have black specks from black pepper in the pureed beans. Okay. Now let's puree these babies. Okay, let's see how it looks. It looks good consistency. All right, now we're going to puree that. I'm sorry, we already pureed it. Now we're going to strain it. So we're going to remove this. Next step will be to strain it back into a clean saucepan. Okay, so we'll just pour it into the strainer, and then we're going to push it through the strainer like we have with several other purees. Starting with the rubber spatula, that seems to be working pretty well, so we probably will not need the wooden spoon. Now when you get down to this is mostly fiber that's probably not going to press through the strainer. So now we're going to rinse off our spatula and clean the back of the strainer. Okay, now let's adjust our seasoning. I think it needs a little bit more salt. Add a little salt to it. I think it also needs a little bit more of the white pepper, just a little. And I'm going to add a little bit more of the balsamic vinegar, just to give it a little bit more depth of flavor. Okay, so this is, you're tasting it, you're deciding whether you like it, right? Clean spoon, let's taste it again. Perfect. Now what we want to do is keep this warm until we're ready to plate up. So now it's time to season the scallops. We're just going to do light sprinkling of salt, and then twist of pepper. Turn them over and do the same thing on the other side. And then pick up the extra like I like to do. That gives a little bit more seasoning. Actually gets onto the protein the amount of seasoning that you chose to use, but some of it fell off on the plate. And also by doing this, you press the seasoning into the protein so that it stays on there when it's being cooked. Okay, now it's time to sear the scallops. We're going to add some high smoke point oil to the cast iron skillet, and we're going to make sure that we're going to turn the flame on to about medium and heat up that pan till we just start to get whiffs of smoke off of that oil. Also, I want to make sure it's coating bottom of the pan. If we don't have it completely coating, we'll add a little bit more oil. It looks okay. Looks okay. Okay, let's start our scallops. I'm swirling them around in a little oil to make sure they're coated, okay? And we're going to do jumbo scallops 3 minutes per side. Okay, it's been 3 minutes. We're going to turn them over. Oh, look at that beautiful color that we have on there. Make sure that the other side's got some oil on it. Oh, beautiful. Okay, we're going to do 3 minutes on this side. Okay, it's been 3 minutes on this side. They are beautiful on both sides. Okay, so we're going to take these off, keep them in a warm spot until we are ready to plate, which actually is right now. Turn off the heat. Okay, time to plate. We're going to take some of the bean puree and pool it in the bottom of our plate. In this case, I'm using a shallow bowl, okay? And then we'll place one of the pepper squares right in the center. And then we're going to place one of the scallops right on top of that. And then we're going to garnish the scallop with just a twist of sea salt, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. And then we're going to garnish the scallop with some caviar. Okay, there we have it. That's lesson 67, seared sea scallop with roasted red pepper, white bean puree, and caviar. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is @ChefsApprentice, Cook Like a Pro. Next up is the first of our challenging lessons. But if you've cooked your way from lesson 1 all the way up here to lesson 67, the challenging lessons that start next week shouldn't be very challenging to you at all. And that lesson will be roasted duck and a baked apple with a savory applesauce. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.